So exam 2 is coming up this Friday. It will have the same directions as exam 1 at the top of the first page. So it will say show your work, simplify completely, find exact answers when possible. For a square root, remember, the exact answer is the square root. For example, you would write square root of 5 with the little square root symbol and the 5. You wouldn't put that in your calculator and then write the decimal out. If you have to round off from your calculator, then it is not exact. So the square root of 5 is what we want, not the decimal approximation. Simplifying completely has ramifications when you're looking at those roots as well. So when you simplify completely, if you have the square root of 12, you wouldn't leave the square root of 12. You would write 2 times the square root of 3 instead of the square root of 12. There is an hour and 20 minutes for you to take the exam. There are 17 questions on it. None of those questions are word problems. The sections covered are the sections covered since the last exam. So 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.6, 10.2, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5. Make sure you have the quadratic formula memorized for this. You can use the YouTube videos that use the quadratic formula along with the Pop Goes the Weasel song, and then you can memorize it a little more easily. Whoops, let's take a look at your review. The review helps you focus on what you need to know for the exam. As you're working on the review, if you try a problem 3 times, then the practice another version will be available, so you can practice another version. Remember, this isn't for a grade, so on this review assignment, you can just use it how you like. So you can expect, like problem 1, you can expect a formula to be solved. This is from your textbook in section 8.1. You can see that from the problem name. So in the blue bar up above it says TGEIALG 5. That's your textbook, Tussey and Gunderson Intermediate Algebra Edition 5, and section 8.1. So the 8.1 tells you what section this comes from. Okay, so you can practice formulas in 8.1 and then also inequalities in 8.1. I did not ask that you graph the solution set. You can write your answer on a graph if you like, or you can write it with interval notation when you have an inequality. Either way is okay on the test. Here's another inequality with fractions. So you'll want to multiply both sides of this equation in problem 3 by 42. So if you multiply both sides of this inequality by 42, then the denominators will cancel and you'll have a nicer problem to work with. Then in section 8.2 you have functions. So if you have a function is single valued. So no x will go to 2 different y's. So this example is a function, and you can see other examples in your homework or in the ebook that are not functions. So each x has to go to exactly 1 y to be a function. So 10 goes to 20, 20 goes to 40, 30 goes to 60. If 10 had gone to 20 and 10 had also had an arrow going to 40, it would not be a function. But this is a function. Number 5, you just have to plug in the value of 2 where the x is and then simplify. So you don't do anything on the left-hand side of the problem. That's just a name. You just plug in a 2. So you get 3 divided by 2 minus 4, or you plug in the negative 2. Number 6, I almost always put problems like number 6 on exams because they cover so much. They make sure you know how to find the slope of the line and the equation of a line when you know the slope and a point on it. Well, I guess I'm not going to go through each question unless you email me and ask me about a question, and then I'll be happy to go through those, okay? So you do have a problem like number 7 on the exam, or number 8, where you have to look at a graph and decide if the graph is the graph of a function or not. You'll have to be able to factor when there's 4 terms. Okay, so then you'd use factoring by grouping. You'll have to be able to factor when there's 3 terms. Here you'll be using the quadratic formula, but in number 12, you would multiply both sides of the equation by 8 so that you would have nicer numbers to use when you use the quadratic formula. Number 13, you'll want to factor under the radical, and then once you've factored under the radical, you can find the square root. The domain of a function is the allowable x values. So in number 14, you would want to make sure the 18 minus the 9x is greater than or equal to 0. So you'd solve for the x's that make 18 minus 9x greater than or equal to 0. And then you have your simplifying your roots. So you'll have to make sure you know how to use the exponent rules in numbers 16 and 17. Number 18, you'll have to be able to simplify. It's a good idea to have the cubes of 1 through 6 memorized and the squares of 1 through 15 for these types of problems. So lots to do here. I almost always put a problem like number 21. On the exam, of course, it would not be multiple choice because that checks a lot of the things that you need to know as well. Okay, so make sure you know how to simplify when you're looking at a sum or a difference of radicals in the denominator like number 21. And how about number 20? When you square that, you don't get 64 minus 13, right? Instead, you multiply that out using FOIL. So 8 minus the square root of 13 times 8 minus the square root of 13, and then use FOIL to get the correct answer. You'll need to know how to solve an equation with square roots in it. I almost always put one like 23 that has 2 square roots in it plus another number besides, because that makes it a little trickier. If you can do the review well, then you should be set to do the test well. If you have any questions, please email me.